Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nusrat Mirza Sahab, the organizers of today's event, Rabta Forum, distinguished speakers here on the stage, and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I remember about 2 months back when we met, myself and Nusrat Mirza Sahab in Karachi. So he asked me that I would like to invite you. We like to organize a forum. And he said, there's a choice. Would you like to talk to the media, or you like to talk to some political workers or leaders, or you would like to talk to people from any other walk of life? And one of the choices that he threw in was of academics. And I said, let's meet with the academics. And I'm glad we did that, because I think it's their presence more than anybody else which has brought in all these young people under this roof. Because that is an audience which at our stage of life we need to interact with and we need to engage with. And I'm glad they're here in such a large number. A few years back, when Mr. Nawaz Sharif was the Prime Minister of Pakistan and he visited Washington and he met President Obama, he took out a piece of paper from his pocket and he spoke from that paper. Ever since that time, it has become unfashionable to speak from a script. And with the new Prime Minister, he has a habit of speaking off the cuff. He thinks it's below his dignity to speak from a script. So when I was coming, I was very much concerned about this, whether I should go on speaking from a script or whether I should speak off the cuff. And we are used to speaking off the cuff, because in a military career, you hardly have, particularly when you're faced with your soldiers, with your command, there are no papers to be taken out from the pocket. You have to speak what is in your heart. But then when I thought I'm going to come with academics and I'm going to come with people who are studying these issues formally, I think it would be an insult to come without adequate preparation. And that is why I want to tell you that I came with a script, not the Mia Saab style, but each one word I have deliberated upon. And I have put it down here because I believe in each of those words. Nobody else has written the script for me. So I thought I'll speak from this. But then we were, time was running short. So what I'm going to do is that I'm still going to give you the salient, the bullet points, as we say in the military, the various points that I had included. And then I thought that will give you an idea of throwing in questions. I would like that we spend more time on the Q&A rather than what I have to say from my side. But before I do that, I just want to, from the today's deliberation, there are two things that I thought I'll say up front. And this is my experience everywhere, that when we engage in discussing such subjects, which are current history, which are related to critical issues to our national security and, in fact, national survival, because when you add security and economics and challenges and threats, it becomes an issue of, it becomes an existential debate, a debate about our existence. So when you're discussing those issues, it is very important to remember what I'm going to say. First, and this is something which I've learned over a period of time, through decades of my experience and exposure to these issues. The first thing, that if you have inadequate information or you have incorrect information, or you make wrong assumptions, then you can never reach right conclusions. And if your conclusions are wrong, any policy, any plan of action, any strategy that you work out can never be right. It has to be wrong because the starting point was it's based on wrong assumptions or it's based on inadequate and incorrect information. And most of the discussions that we either see on the television or we come across in our daily lives on various forums is either based on incorrect information or inadequate information, or it is based on wrong assumptions. And I'll give you an example. I'll just give you one example. And that is about Afghanistan, about the Taliban. That Pakistan created the Taliban. Now you've made a wrong assumption. Or we in Pakistan, okay, Americans and Europeans and Indians, as a part of their narrative, would like to say that Pakistan has done this, to malign us. But we within Pakistan make a wrong assumption, or we have inadequate or incorrect information. So when we say that we have done it, so then all your conclusions are wrong because you're starting with the wrong assumption or wrong information. And then any strategy that you work out, any policy that you formulate will be wrong. This has been our problem with a lot of issues. So this is one thing I thought, again, when I was sitting there and I was listening in, I said, this I must re-emphasize. The second thing that is I want to plead, I want to urge, I want to submit to our academics as well as to our intellectuals, we discuss Pakistan's dire straits. We discuss the challenges that we have. And then we, in that, to reinforce, to strengthen our debate, to our argument, we go to the extreme. We say this will bring into question our nuclear issue, our nuclear program, our nuclear weapons. I had appealed to some of these key people who come on the media and discuss Pakistan's economic straits, and I requested them that when you discuss this, never utter the word N. Never. Because then you are playing to another narrative, and that narrative is that if you are economically weak, if you are not doing well, why the hell should you have nuclear weapons? So my recommendation on every forum, everywhere is that's got nothing to do with this. It's got nothing to do with it. Please keep that in mind. This is like saying that if we are economically weak, then why are we independent? We shouldn't be independent. We should go back to pre-1947. No. That's not the issue. So I just wanted to make this request. And before I get on to my script, one more recommendation that I want to, submit is Pakistan, we are used to challenges. We are a nation with enormous resilience. We cannot be subdued. We have always lived on the edge. We have always lived in a crisis of existence. So my recommendation is please be positive. Nothing is going to happen to Pakistan. When I go abroad and I am onto a lot of speaking circuits and think tanks, a lot of wise people who look at Pakistan, they are so appreciative of our instinct for survival, our instincts for fighting back, our instinct for resilience. There you guys, you somehow or the other always come out of when we think we can't bet on you. I think this time you will go down as a state. You come out with some such smart thing that you're always back there. We should take pride in that. So my recommendation is particularly for the younger generation, just be positive. Inshallah, things will be okay. And now I come on to my script. I'm just going to read some wordings which I wrote. The first one that I said was that Pakistan, like any self-respecting nation, has been striving to create conducive environment for its citizens to live with honor, dignity, and self-respect in accordance with the wishes of our founding fathers. Unfortunately, ever since our existence, वही जो बात मैं पहले कह रहा था, we have confronted with daunting challenges in the realization of our objectives. And these challenges are external and domestic. Now, in the increasingly complex and insecure global and regional environment, this distinction between external and domestic has blurred. Now we don't know whether this challenge is because of external reasons or because of our own failing. So we just have to, that is why our responses have to be integrated. Our evaluation has to be integrated and our responses have to be integrated. It should cater for the external and it should cater for the domestic. What I listed was that I will tell you about the global and regional environment. Then I'll talk of the external threats. Then I'll tell you of the domestic challenges. And then I'll focus on the opportunities we have and on the way forward. As I said, I'm not going to go over that because the script is much longer. But the first thing I talked about was global and regional environment. And I'll just pick up 2-3 key sentences. One was that the international order is increasingly complex, insecure, and unstable. Increasingly. Every day it is becoming more and more insecure and unstable and increasing complexity. With the post-Cold War status quo rapidly fracturing, there was a certain status quo after the end of the Cold War. That is fracturing and multipolarities coming in place of unipolarity, where there was only one superpower that is replaced. We have heard about the emergence of China as a global power. And I have some views on China because as a youngster like you, when I was a bachelor, I think about 22, 24 years old, I landed in China in the Cultural Revolution to be trained there, and I spent a year there. So I saw Chairman Mao, and I saw the Cultural Revolution, and I know the strength of the Chinese system. So I'll be too happy to discuss with you subsequently. So the rise of China is a phenomena where the United States views as a challenge to their predominant centrality in the international system. And as a consequence, there are concerns of a new Cold War and a new great game, as they call. Now there is a tripolar contest between the United States, the Russians, and the Chinese. And the United States, in this contest, is promoting what is called the Indo-Pacific strategy, in which India is the central pivot. Of course, they are also including Japan and Australia, the other three, and this is called the quadrilateral group based on what they call maritime democracies. So this was the international environment. And the only thing I added in the international environment I thought I'll share with you is the means of power projection are changing. And it's because of our lives have changed because of communication and information and robotics and cyber and the fusion of various technologies, which is impacting life, work, patterns, and warfare. So with the result, we find that how the application of force has taken a different dimension in the information age with the preeminence of media. So now issues are about perception management. Weapons are narratives and counter-narratives. And they talk of no more hard power. They talk of soft power and smart power. And they talk of kinetic and non-kinetic. So these are issues. They talk of hybrid and fifth generation warfare. This is what has happened. Now I'll come to the region. That was the global. Again, I'll just take 2 minutes on the region. You see, to our west, in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf region, there are stunning developments which have seriously complicated the geopolitical calculus. Concerns over the rise of Iran as a regional hegemon with a distinctly sectarian agenda, US and Russian strategic posturing and rivalry in the Middle East around Syria, rising sectarian tensions, civil wars, conflicts, and dangers of internal destabilization in all the Middle Eastern countries. That is the situation. Now, and this is my conclusion, which I keep emphasizing everywhere, all states in the region, extending from Lebanon to Pakistan, are multi-ethnic and multi-sect. Any tampering with these issues in any one state is bound to have a domino effect. It has been going on, whether it is Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, it's in Iran, it's in Yemen, it is in Bahrain, it is in eastern Saudi Arabia, it is in Pakistan, it is in Afghanistan. This is that domino effect because somebody has tinkered with it somewhere. So we have to keep this in mind. For Pakistan, now you find a very interesting thing. Sunni jihadists and transnational Shia forces are fighting with each other. We have Hezbollah on one side, and we have the Daesh and Al-Qaeda on the other side. So this is a phenomena which is complicating the whole situation. Now this poses critical diplomatic and relationship challenges for Pakistan, with Saudi Arabia and its allies on the one side, and Qatar, Iran, and now even Turkey to some extent on the other side. So this much about to our west. I'll come now to our own. Afghanistan, there has been enough discussion on Afghanistan, and there is a good possibility that we may be seeing a peace process taking shape. It is in the best interest of Pakistan. And Pakistan must support, and we have unswervingly supported peace process in Afghanistan all along. We were very clear. I was with General Musharraf when he, for the first time in his life, met President Bush after 9/11. I was with him. And this is the wrong perception that we wanted some sort of a continuation of conflict. He was very clear when he told President Bush, he said, Mr. President, you have intervened in Afghanistan, but please bring this war to an early closure, transit from military operations to a political strategy. And his answer was, Mr. President, help us do that. He said, help us do it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of, gap between a spoken intent and then the operationalization of that into a strategy. The Americans have taken 18 years. So we were very clear from day one. Pakistan was very clear from day one. They must get into a political strategy. There must be a dialogue. It must be an inclusive dialogue. Everybody must be included. And this is what the Americans have come to after 18 years. Now, as I said, hope has rekindled about the prospects of peace in Afghanistan due to the recent dialogue in Doha and the intra-Afghan dialogue in Moscow, as well as, now all this has happened because there is an out-of-box solution which has been thrown in by President Trump. He has told his generals, he has told everybody, look guys, either you get me a victory which is not coming, I'm getting out if you don't find a solution. This out-of-box thinking is what has driven what has happened in Doha and in Moscow. But we have to be very cautious in our optimism because of, and I have been saying this for 10 years, that look, when the peace process comes, it will have to be very carefully protected. It will have to be protected in Washington, in Kabul, in the region, and amongst the Taliban. In Washington, there is infighting. There are two views. One view is we can afford to spend $50 billion. We are a superpower. We don't have to accept defeat. In Kabul, there is a war. There is a war economy. There are beneficiaries and stakeholders in the war economy. They don't want peace. Amongst the Taliban, there are hardliners who think they have sacrificed so much. Why should they now listen to the Americans? And of course, in the region, there are countries like India who are beneficiaries of the conflict in Afghanistan. They don't want the conflict to end. Coming to our east. Again, on India, there has been enough said. I just will say a few words. In the post-9/11 environment, it has been a persistent Indian endeavor to isolate and weaken Pakistan through direct and through non-kinetic means. There is irrefutable evidence of whether we take the case of Kulbhushan Yadav or whether we take the statements of Ehsan Ul Haq, who said that it was the Indians in Afghanistan who were guiding the TTP to carry out all that in Pakistan. Now, what is the problem? What has happened? Of course, BJP and the Sangh Parivar, who are the architects of the Hindutva, they are hardliners. They are anti-Muslims and anti-minorities, and they are very hard line on Pakistan. But with the start of the mass uprising and consequent Indian atrocities in Kashmir, as well as the operationalization of CPAC, India has become particularly frustrated and consequently jingoistic. These two things have really played on their nerves, what is happening in Kashmir and what is happening on CPAC. So this is the issue. Now, Modi came with a lot of promises to his people. He has failed to deliver. He is getting into an election May this year. Now, he must find an alternative strategy for winning votes. And that alternative strategy would be to play up Hindutva, to hit at the minorities, to hit at Pakistan. And that is what is the concern today. But there is also a hope that you would hear from the prime ministers and from our ministers off and on, that maybe, and this is what Najmuddin Sheikh Saab also earlier said, maybe after the elections, if there is a weakened Modi, or there is a change, then, and there is a possibility of a change also, that if BJP doesn't do too well, they may change their prime ministerial candidate within the BJP. There is a feeling that that may bring a thaw in Pakistan-India relations. Now, just one point that I wanted to highlight about the Indians, that they have been exceptional beneficiaries of the double and triple standards on disarmament and non-proliferation by the West. Dehyphenation of India and Pakistan to sponsor India's strategic build-up and subjecting Pakistan to discriminatory restrictions seriously undermines the strategic stability in South Asia. And the Indians keep challenging the credibility of Pakistan's nuclear deterrence through doctrinal as well as technological provocations. Those are provocations, what they do. We don't want to be in an arms race with India because we know our economic straits. But we have to keep the credibility of our strategic deterrence in place, and we have to restore a strategic balance for our defense and security. So much about the regional. Now, as far as the threat is concerned, there are two types of threats. One is an indirect one is a direct one. The indirect is the global environment pose a threat. The relationships between the United States and India pose a threat. The international presence in Afghanistan and the destabilization in Afghanistan poses a threat. This is the indirect one. The direct one is India. Many of you who are not so young like me would have read the history that India never reconciled to the creation of Pakistan. And they made very early attempts to undo the creation of Pakistan. They never reconciled to that. And that has continued ever since. Of course, now, fueled by economic growth, they are trying to, sort of widen the qualitative and quantitative gaps in their capabilities, their defense capabilities vis-a-vis Pakistan. They are the largest importer of military hardware in the world, one of the largest in the world. And we can't compete with them in that. There's no arms race that we are getting into because their defense budget is almost the size of our national budget. That also underlines the criticality of economic development to our national survival and our national security. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, in 1965 and 1971, they assured us that there will be no problem from the West. But then the threat dimension has changed. There is an Indo-Afghanistan strategic agreement, and we continue to see problems, destabilizing problems on our western borders, so that is a possibility. I will not go into any non-kinetic and soft power threat, except that I'll tell you one thing, that non-kinetic and soft power threats emanate from this collaboration between the great powers, the superpower, and India. And it is primarily driven and it is implemented by offensive diplomacy, socio-cultural subversion. Keep these words in mind. Socio-cultural subversion and exploitation of internal fault lines and media onslaughts. What do the superpower want from us? First, it wants compliance with their policies on fight against terrorism and Afghanistan's endgame. Second, it wants Pakistan's support on key foreign policy objectives in respect to Indian hegemony, China, and nuclear non-proliferation. And all these cumulatively come in the domain of what now is described as hybrid warfare. So just keep these things in mind. Now, coming on to the domestic challenges, lots of them have already been covered, so I'm just going to list so that you can ask questions if you want. When we became independent, we had weakness of state institutions, insecure frontiers, lack of economic and industrial base. These were the most obvious challenges. These were further accentuated by internal factors such as a constitutional vacuum, extra-constitutional interventions, role of retrogressive religious, ethnic, and tribal forces, illiteracy, population explosion, economic mismanagement, social and regional disparities, and an increasing militarization in the society. I don't want to go into any details. If you want to ask something, you're welcome. My own personal view is we have a democracy in Pakistan. We say we have a democracy in Pakistan. In my view, it is a label for kleptocracy and an oligarchy. If we were to have genuine democracy, I can assure you many of our problems would get addressed in the process of practicing democracy. As I said, I'd like to say a few words about the way forward. Is there hope? Yes. I'd like to say of. That's why I'm turning pages. You would agree with me, I'm going to read from here, that we would be able to effectively cope with the challenges and exploit the opportunities if we are prepared for what is coming and we are accurate in our analysis of our situation. It's not based on disinformation, not based on wrong facts, wrong information, or wrong assumptions. These preparations would entail a review of a broad spectrum of national policies, strategies, and actions. I shall merely list some of them. Where do we need to relook? First, we need clarity on our hardcore national interests. Remember that. We need national cohesion and consensus on core issues. We need an understanding of the emerging scenarios around us to foresee the challenges and the opportunities. We need effective mutual consultation within the state organs, within the federation and the provinces, between the civil society and the state. We need political stability, internal security, and economic self-sustenance. We need a proactive foreign policy, and we need credible national narratives. The bottom line, we have to put our house in order. We have to put our house in order. This is the bottom line. Now, the situation underlines the significance of our time-tested strategic partnership with China. Please understand. It doesn't mean that we leave out and we ignore our relationship with the United States. It is critical. And let me tell you a very interesting thing. Throughout my service and since my retirement, whenever I've gone to China, and as I said, because of my relationship and my background, I go there every year or maybe more than once a year. Whenever we went to China, in our official positions or subsequently, the Chinese leaders' first advice to us is, don't spoil your relations with the United States. They always tell us, preserve your relationship with the United States. It is to your benefit. It is to your advantage. So that is the second. And third is that we must consolidate the recent warming of relations with Russia. Combined with a distinct improvement in our internal security situation and the macro stabilization of our economy, launching of CPAC is expected to unlock dramatic developments in regional integration and connectivity to realize the vision of Pakistan as an energy and economic hub. Here I just want to say a word about Pakistan's struggle against terrorism. I want to tell you, probably we are the only country, and certainly we are the only armed forces who have been victorious against terrorism. No other country, including NATO and the United States, have succeeded against terrorism. Pakistan has succeeded. With regards to our neighbors in South Asia, we are endeavoring our best to support peace and reconciliation in Afghanistan and normalization of relations with India. However, we have to be realistic. I believe that one-sided relations are never sustainable. We must be realistic in our expectations. We have, as I said, sacrificed enormously in the struggle against terrorism over the last 17 years. And its dividends are now emerging. Changing travel advisories. If you are in Islamabad, I'm sure in Karachi, you're hearing so many of the European countries are changing their travel advisories on Pakistan. And then, of course, I know the British Airways team which came to Pakistan to carry out an assessment whether they should start their flights to Islamabad, they met me and they asked me, the General, can we do it? And I said, you must do it. It's a win-win situation. And I'm so happy they're coming. And I remember that British Airways executive who called on me, who met me, told me that, I said, why are you starting? Well, tell me the commercial reason. He said, we are not the only one. Lufthansa, probably KLM and Lufthansa have become the same. And he named another half a dozen airlines which are thinking of restarting to enter the Pakistan market. I was very surprised because this was not in our media. We were not aware of this. However, we have a long way to go. It's not merely about exterior maneuver or perception management. We need international support and understanding of our legitimate stand on Kashmir, our sincere support for a stable, peaceful Afghanistan, and the Indian rejection of our peaceful overtures. However, and this is the challenge, our efforts are being undermined by the narratives of Mumbai, Pathankot, Uri, the Quetta Shura, the Haqqani network, the issues of FATF, which is money laundering, and thank God it's behind us, the blasphemy and Asia Bibi cases. These are the challenges that we had to overcome. We have to overcome them. Nobody else is going to help them. With our ever-changing geopolitical and security landscape, a new strategic narrative of Pakistan is overdue. The narrative should be based on the premise that our long-term national interests are achieved to bring prosperity and security. All stakeholders should play their part in evolving this inclusive narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, you would agree with me that the challenges we confront are phenomenal. However, the good news is that our national capacity is greater than the challenges. We have been exposed to an extended period and confluence of external and domestic pressures. However, and I repeat my key word, our resilience and sacrifices have helped us survive, and we are now at the cusp of a strategic transformation into a stronger and prosperous Pakistan, inshallah. Thank you very much.